Hello, hello. How we doing today? Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. How are we? And welcome back to those of you over here on Big Up for the weekly news roundup. And obviously, if you're watching us on YouTube, it's been recorded live over here on Big Up. We do this. I try to do this every single Friday just to make sure we kind of gets us all up to speed on all of the news and everything that's been going on around because sometimes there can be quite a lot, and I think it kind of can contextualize exactly what is happening. So if you're watching here on Big Up, thank you, and if you're watching on YouTube, you can always come join on Big Up. And obviously, once the games get going again, Big Up's where we do all of the watch-alongs and everything. But actually, a decent week of news, and I think the overall theme of the news this week is sales. Frankly, it's outs. The vast majority of the news, the vast majority of solid information is about outs. And that's what I've been pretty much talking about and hearing about all week as well. That we're starting to make headway on the outs. I know that there's been during this kind of quiet time while we're sitting on the Mbumo deal a bit, letting it fester, I guess, or putting some pressure on Brentford, as well as obviously doing a lot of checks and things on different potential other targets. We are working on outs, and that's the biggest theme of all the news. It's been a little quiet, I will say, on the news front, but certainly it's not nothing. There's definitely a lot going on the sales side of it. So, as with every single time I do this weekly one, what we're going to do is I'm just going to start go through a bunch of articles through the week, share them on the screen, talk about them, talk about what they all mean, and keep it kind of steady and concise on that front so it doesn't take too long. And then at some point later today, I will do another live or something, and it's Friday, so it'll probably be a bit of news to discuss, and then just kind of a hangout. And hopefully, I have the lag issue sorted out. I sorted them out at my house, but for some reason at this office, I seem to still get issues from time to time. So hopefully, that'll be all okay today. All right. Weekly news roundup. Let's get into it. There is actually a lot to discuss. Let me just pull the first article up here, and then I'll answer questions kind of as we go, as well on any of the things that we're talking about here from people over on Big Up. All right. I think I've got all of my pieces kind of put together. So let's start with this one. So we got at the start of the week kind of some bad news. Okay, essentially we started with a little bit of what appears to be bad news. The first thing, and this is technically I think this was Saturday, but this was the day after our last live, so or our last weekly roundup. So I figured this would be one to talk about. We got a whole bunch of stories that kind of briefed all at once about Victor Gyökeres choosing Arsenal over Manchester United, wanting to hopefully wait and see what Arsenal do and see if they can make a deal for him, and kind of prioritizing them. And so it's sort of an interesting timing of things because I think that from United's perspective, they were hoping to have kind of the potential to move on a deal like Victor Gyökeres at striker ahead of while they're waiting and working on the Mbumo thing in general. And e- they were kind of pushing ahead on the deal on his side, pushing forward with it a bit to see where it would go. And the feedback was basically we're not really ready to accept the deal at the moment. We're not really ready to move to United at the moment, because I want to see what happens with Arsenal and they're still in there. And the important thing to bear in mind here is that um, Arsenal have been very, very active in the conversations with Victor Gyökeres. They're not just like sitting around doing nothing. Arsenal have been involved. They've been actively meeting with him all of that. So it's kind of understandable that that has been happening. Essentially, it's definitely understandable. That he feels genuinely like Arsenal will be coming in for him. Now, as to the feeling as to whether or not like this is a good thing, or like whether or not United should still be involved or not. In my instant reaction personally was, when this kind of came out, was like, well, screw it. He's dead. We don't need Victor Gyökeres. And then as a few days went on, essentially a few things happened. Number one, United are 100% still in for Victor Gyökeres. They're absolutely still very interested. They're still following it pretty tightly. And a big part of that is the lack of reasonable alternatives, which we will discuss in a minute. Big part of it is the lack of reasonable alternatives. The fact that it's going to be difficult for United to get in any other striker this summer on a reasonable price. That is, somebody that they rate highly. So they've stayed in for him, and to a degree, it's not much different to where we might have been on, say a Lenny Oro or something like that last year, where he wanted to go to Madrid. He was kind of waiting for Madrid, and we spent time convincing. Again, the main thing is that, of course, Madrid, it's Arsenal, and being another team in the Premier League doesn't feel particularly great. Now, there continue to be a fair bit of reports that he's, kind of waiting on Arsenal. They seem to be struggling with a deal for Benjamin Šeško, which is, I think, their priority target. And so it's one that essentially the club are just going to have to wait on, and we're going to have to wait on. And in the meantime, we're working on sales and checking in on other things, but it remains a topic, but just one that maybe isn't going to be an overnight type of thing here. This striker, and we all know we need one, but it seems as though it's going to take a bit of time to figure it out and actually kind of get it sorted. So yeah, that wasn't the best news. That was probably the start of what we're like a little bit of a difficult situation that we were faced with on our process of, I don't know, going through summer. We got Cunha in early, we got Mbumo choosing us, but then what happens after that? We all know we need this striker, and this was kind of the first setback. And it's to be expected that everything's not necessarily going to be going smoothly after we finish, 15th and didn't win the Europa League. If we had, we probably have seen Victor Gyökeres already in the door for us. But given that he's 27, obviously that little decision over, obviously just preferring, not turning down, but preferring a move to a Champions League club is there. It should be well noted, he hasn't rejected United, and he is open to he wants to join the Premier League. So if it's not Arsenal, it's probably us, and that's about it. So we'll see where that goes. The next story, Alejandro Garnacho prioritizing a move to stay in the Premier League. He has essentially been turning down offers that have come in from clubs outside of England. There's been offers from Leverkusen. There's been talk from Italy as well. And he has essentially been not straight up rejecting, but essentially rejecting almost by proxy in demanding, large fees and things like that, large wages and such, and making it clear his preference is to stay in England in the Premier League. And I can very much confirm that to be the case. I think it's something I even shared some weeks ago, that he was going to likely want to stay in the Premier League. This is difficult, frankly. This is a difficult one for United to sort, because the reality is, I can tell you today, there aren't that many clubs in for him. Chelsea are chasing other signings. Arsenal are chasing other signings. Realistically, Aston Villa might be somewhere that fall, of interest. That might be a landing spot that has a potential to work out. That might be somewhere that he could find himself. But they have their own PSR issues and difficulties that may take a little bit of time for them to sort out. So yeah, this is a tricky one. To see where this kind of ends, because Yeah, it's just yeah, it's a tricky one to see where this ends in the Premier League if he wants to stay. I think, as I've shared before, I believe that he's going to have to kind of accept that the interest in him is not as grand as he might have hoped for, and move to a club outside of the top 5, 6 if he wants to stay in England. And United are going to have to be accepting a fairly substantial cut on the fee compared to what they might have wanted, as well as, him not demanding significant wages. Most clubs don't pay as well as United do, even with our lower wage base. If you're going outside the top four, most clubs are not paying you that kind of money in the Premier League. So, might be a bit of a wake up call, but I guess we will see there. But certainly, that's what he is prioritizing. Maybe if it gets late in the window and he's been frozen out of the summer tour and things like that, which has a substantial chance of happening, he might be a little more open and might have to change his mind, or maybe eat crow a little bit on his overall decision. Then obviously the next story that we get to, and you'll see this kind of repeated a lot. This hasn't changed in a while. Is Brian Mbumo, and essentially United being the word being relaxed for Brian and Umo. This comes from Simon Stone at the BBC. There's a lot of rumors and counter rumors, but I'm not getting the impression United are concerned about their attempt to sign Brian and Bumo. Tottenham are keen, yada yada. Look, the reality is that that this is something I've been talking about all week. That they've continued discussions. They're continuing to work on it, but at the moment, nobody's really concerned about the Mbumo deal. We just want to get the fair value, a fair deal from our perspective. And yeah, essentially, we're just waiting for Brentford to come down on the fee a little bit. And the expectation is that they will, and that the deal will get done. And this remains true as of today as well. Then there was the transfer deal sheet. Let me just pull this up really quick, and then I'll make a couple comments on this because a few things were added by the Athletic over the course of the week in general. Obviously, Cunha was announced. Wilcox became the director of football. We kind of know that. Remain in negotiations with Mbumo. Preferences to join United. We signed this young kid from Southampton last week. I think we talked about that too. So the main thing is, what does it say this week? It says Amram would like to reunite with his old Sporting CP striker Victor Gyökeres, although Arsenal's ability to attract Champions League football next season may prove more attractive to the 27-year-old if decision makers at the Emirates prioritize him over Benjamin Šeško of Leipzig. United made contact with Frankfurt last week regarding in-demand striker Hugo Ekitike to explore the parameters of a potential deal. Their 100 million asking price is certainly at the higher end. You can see Mbumo has almost been talked about like an afterthought. Um, then it talks about sales. Betis hoping to secure Antony permanently. Initial conversations have taken place. Onana is expected to stay, although they could sign a backup who could provide him competition. Inter remain interested in Hoyland, Garnacho, Rashford, and Malacia as well. So quite a bit, obviously, in there summarizing a lot of what we know. You can see their kind of wording on the Gyökeres thing being, or Gyökeres thing being, Arsenal's ability, if they prioritize him, we probably choose them, but it doesn't mean United aren't in for it. Made contact about the parameters over Ekitike. Now, David Ornstein spoke on a podcast midweek as well and kind of played that down quite a bit from perspective that I heard, or at least it was aligned with my understanding of it, which is we simply made some checks to find out the deal. And he specifically said it doesn't mean we're one we're pursuing right now, and that it seems like we're putting the striker thing off. So my read on that situation is simply that we are, checking on different strikers and different things now. But given the situation, we're going to wait. We're going to see, do Arsenal go for Šeško? Do they go back for Gyökeres? Do they come off the table for him? And does that open the road for us? Do Frankfurt come way down in their fee because they need to come down like 30, 40 million for any deal to be possible there? In the meantime, we work on these sales. And this Antony one is one I want to talk about quite a bit because I've been covering this for the last few weeks, talking about how we're expecting more talks, more offers, things like that to come in from Betis. And I can definitely confirm that this one is moving, that there have been more discussions between the clubs over this. And they do think that there's a willingness of all parties to make a deal here. And there's even a story today about Antony being willing to take a pay cut to help facilitate it. Good for him, frankly. Not everybody's willing to, as we've seen with Jadon Sancho and such. So, I think that's one that is probably going to happen. I do want to point this one out because this one on Onana, because there's some stories, a lot of stories about Emi Martinez and such that we'll talk about in a minute here. And my understanding and read of the whole situation has been for a while now that it's really tough to move Onana, and that United were more actively looking at players who can provide competition. I think I've said that many times, young keepers or somebody who can provide competition for him. So I think that's the most likely outcome, is that he stays and we go for a younger keeper, not someone like Emi Martinez. Um, but if a big offer came in for Onana, he could certainly leave, but that's not in the plans necessarily for that to happen, and we're not necessarily expecting that. So, plan sort of reality is that we would hopefully move on by India and get a young keeper coming in to provide competition. Plan hope is that he would get a big offer to sell. We get a then we can go for a different keeper to be the out and out for sure number one. So that would be kind of the main stories there. Let's see, what did I have next? Then there was this just kind of basic story here, um, that United agreed a deal for Tom Heaton to stay at the club for one more year. So having another homegrown third keeper backup, nothing much else to say about it except that. Not a big deal. More like housekeeping, but it's good to have a backup keeper in the works. Now, this story starts to get interesting because we're starting to see this ramp up. As I said, we've been working on sales and having a lot of dialogue, and it came to from Dimarzio a few days ago, 3 days ago, that Napoli have re-entered into or entered into newly work for Jadon Sancho and seeing if they can sign Jadon Sancho. And the situation, as I understand it, is that they're willing to meet kind of a fee of 15 to 20 million in the range that we would go for him. But with the wages that we would need to pay off, um, it's kind of a tricky balance here where they're not going to give him enough wages. So we need a little bit more so we can do a payoff. So there's like I would say like in total, a 5 to 10 million gap here in the discussion, and how it balances doesn't particularly matter. If they paid him more wages and we had less of a payoff, then we'd accept a lower fee. If they're going to pay the lower wages, then we would have to accept the higher fee to sort it out. But we do want this to be done permanently, one way or another. So that one is a difficult one. They've got other options and things they're working on, but this is one that is continuing to have dialogue even as of today, and not just Napoli, which I'll get to in a minute. But there is a gap there, 5 to 10 million either way, and how it works to make it work. But it's not completely something I would rule out or put off of the table. Then we got a very interesting kind of story here, which is that Nick Cox is leaving the academy chief position at United to join Everton as their new technical director. Something, a big step up for him positionally. This is definitely the case. This is definitely happening. And certainly, United, I would say, are in a position where they're probably not too worried about replacing him. But at the same time, that doesn't mean it's not a loss. Somebody who's I think done a great job, is really well liked, and has helped the academy quite a lot. Now, there's a lot more to be done on the academy side of things. We have a sporting director of football rather, in Jason Wilcox, who ran an extremely successful academy at City. So they will know what they want out of this and be okay with it, and it's all mutually agreed and all of that. But regardless, one more change at United and him joining Everton. So they'll be in the market for a new academy chief, new under 18s coach, and I think even a new under 21s coach. So a whole academy kind of rework, kind of happening in here. Now, there was this story kind of went under the radar a little bit here, probably because, well, it's not, it's more like a byline from a journalist in covering Chelsea. Chelsea talking about Gittins, Kudus, João Pedro. See, they're not really looking for Alejandro Garnacho like at all. Um, but there is a story relevant here to us in particular. It says, they decided not to buy Sancho. Hold on, I'll see if I can find it. Chelsea failed with an initial approach to Kudus, who was also a target for Manchester United, Newcastle, and one other unnamed Premier League club. So United have looked at Kudus, and they did, and it even says in here that we made an offer of some kind of swap deal for Kudus, which is rather interesting. And there we go. There's another story that is good one. That I'll pull up here in a second just to add to the news that actually just came out from DiMarzio on that goalkeeper front. So let me just pull that up so I can get to it a little bit later here in a few minutes. But it's good news, and again adds up to the whole concept of a young keeper is essentially what we might be looking for. Yeah, that is good. But it could also mean Onana leaves, which would be rather interesting. Where were we? Let me get back to this. So yeah, Kudus is an interesting name for us. He would obviously make a good 10, but more like a Mbumo alternative and probably not one we're actively pursuing at this point in time. Then there's the further story on Everton in advanced talk to appoint Nick Cox. What else do we got here? Why did I pull this article up? Give me 1 second. This is about Madueke, but I'm not sure why I pulled it up. Oh yeah, Arsenal pursuing. So I won't pull it up on the screen because I can't really show anything on it. But Arsenal pursuing Madueke. I'm not exactly sure what that would be all about. But let's see. So then there was this. This line in an article from Luckhurst. Well-placed figures at United spoke about 3 or 4 signings before the end of last season. 3 of those would go straight into the first team. Now, essentially, that would be the 3 forwards. uh, you know, that's it. That's the idea. Getting 3 new forwards in, like I said before, goals, goals, goals. This was the idea, and then ideally getting another midfielder and a goalkeeper was basically the summer agenda. I don't know what's going on with this website, but we'll leave it at that. Then we have this from Fabrizio, and he says that the goalkeeper position is still one to watch for Manchester United. It's not something imminent or close, but the topic remains depending what's going to happen with Andre Onana. United not desperate to sell Onana again, but he's not untouchable. So again, the point being it's going to be hard to sell him. We're not like actively trying to throw him out, but if an offer comes in, he'd not be untouchable, and we'd be looking at different ones. Now, Vanya Milinkovic-Savic continued to remain on there. We've heard about Lamens, and we've also heard quite a lot from Emi Martinez. And for me, it's probably coming a little bit from the player side in this case, a little bit more than it's probably coming from us in terms of the how concrete that interest is in 1 second in Emi Martinez. I think we are interested, but again, certainly he would not be the competition for Onana. He'd be a replacement. If we were to sell Onana, that would be the case. So this is an interesting one to keep an eye on. But it's strange because United side they're saying Onana is going to stay, and we're going to get like we've gotten solid reports from the Athletic, from Evening News, from a whole bunch of places that Onana is set to stay, and the difficulty from my side has not been whether or not we would want to replace him, because my information has always maintained that in an ideal world we replace him. The problem has always been the cost and the difficulty in being able to replace him, and whether we can sell him, and we don't want to use up a bunch of budget. So we don't want to go buy a 40 million keeper with our budget without selling him and having some money back, recouping costs and getting wages off. But I've always been of the opinion that, not the opinion, but of the information that they would, if they could replace him. Now, is Emi Martinez the right one for this? I don't really know, but certainly there's obviously interest there. If you could sell Onana, if you could get Emi Martinez for rumored 25, 30 million. It's a bit of an upgrade. I don't know how to feel about it though. I'm not sure it's enough of an upgrade buying a 33-year-old keeper in, you know, the door. I think there's better options out there that we could go for as well. And here's an interesting one because Phil and I covered this one on Monday. I think personally that this one could be done perhaps without necessarily getting Onana out, but this is now being covered by DiMarzio, so we'd imagine that it's pretty concrete. That he says Monaco survey for Onana, Carnesecchi among the objectives of United to replace him. Now, I don't know anything about this player, like at all. I don't know if you do. If anybody in the chat really knows anything about this goalkeeper, I'm going to pull him up on screen and take a look here. He's 24 years old. He seems to have be high rated in terms of his shot stopping and his ability to make saves. And that is definitely the number one priority, I guess I would say, of United for a goalkeeper. I think I've mentioned that a few times that they wanted a pair of kind of safe hands. I can just pull this up, though I don't think it's going to show us everything we need to know. What we see is on the saves, prevented goals per 90 and save percentage, very, very high. He's highly rated as a shot stopper. Doesn't show much elsewhere, but that could just be team style and things. I'd have to look into it a bit more. But this is the big number here, is he prevents a lot of expected goals. That's what you want. That's a good shot stopper, and essentially that's been the priority for any keeper that they're looking at. So in that sense, you know, it adds up as a target. He's 24 years old. I have no idea what the cost would be. I would suggest that we might not have to sell Onana in order to get him. Here's some more stats we can look at real quick. Yeah, really good in terms of goals against for Atalanta. High clean sheet percentages. Decent decent numbers showing up here. He's pretty big, 6'3" and a half, 24 years old. So this is an interesting one. Obviously, one we're going to have to keep an eye on as a potential story for us as a keeper. Does he come in to replace Onana directly, or does he come in as a backup or as competition? Remains to be seen. The Onana story is interesting. It kind of feels like De Gea in the past, which is like, though a little bit different. I spent all year talking about how we wanted a keeper this year, same as I did the season De Gea left. And mostly throughout the whole year, it was denied. And then suddenly you started getting reports about keepers, and then suddenly De Gea left. And we've kind of seen the same here where we've been getting Onana's going to stay, keeper's not a priority, keeper's not a priority. And then suddenly we're looking at a bunch of keepers and we're getting rumors left and right. And it feels a bit the same to me on that. Now, I still think it'll be difficult to move Onana, but they would move him if they could. I still think it's unlikely he leaves because it'll be difficult, but that doesn't mean we won't get a keeper in. And it's starting to feel like we just might actually get a keeper in. Then we get this. United have received a loan inquiry for Marcus Rashford. And United are prepared to the possibility. Inter have asked about him. Barcelona are obviously still in the running there. And I think that Rashford is probably a lot more likely to go on loan than to be sold permanently this summer. I also think it is extremely likely he does leave this summer, not only because there's been no plans or talk about reintegration, but also because he is willing to go to other clubs. Now, Barcelona are working on Nico Williams at the moment, but a thing that has to be important is to understand is that that's not ruling Rashford out. Apparently, that has nothing to do with it, and they're very, very top journalists have also been saying that they're still going to look at Rashford after that. So right at the moment, Marcus is absolutely kind of waiting for Barcelona for them to come in for him, but he is open to other clubs and open to working, going to other teams abroad if that doesn't come on the table. So we'll see where this remains. From United's perspective, you know, it's unlikely they're going to make a ton on a sale because of wage payoff and things like that in general. but another loan with a decent option is probably what will end up happening here. And I would say Barcelona is still on the cards, but Italy being, you know, interested as well is important. He would consider that move, and I think again that's what makes him easier to move than Garnacho in this situation is that he while he wants Barcelona, oh, he is willing to work on other deals. Great. Well done. All right. Antony is prepared to take a 30% wage cut. So we're discussing this before. They're working on a deal with Betis. This is moving quite well as far as I understand. And he's willing to take a wage cut to make it happen. So this seems like one that has potential to get done. And it's probably the most solid of the outs as of today that this is kind of happening. Just close some things that might help. I have like 63 Chrome tabs open, which is probably not helping this thing to not crash. Chrome is a certainly a user. All right, and then this we kind of saw it with the Marzio, but this story started with L'Equipe this morning saying that AS Monaco are considering a move for Onana. So let's see. If they can give us some money. We'll likely need 30 million or so to make a deal happen there. And then finally, on Jadon Sancho, DiMarzio as well says Juventus are also interested in Jadon Sancho and starting to work on a deal for him. That one also has potential. Again, we weren't that far off with Napoli. It seems quite plausible, and Sancho is definitely open to the move to either Napoli or Juventus. He's definitely open to Italy. So, whew, a lot on the outs right now. A lot on the outs right now. Obviously, an out in the goalkeeper would instantly allow us to make a deal for a goalkeeper coming in. That's still something we would like to do in an ideal world. I think we could get a keeper without Onana leaving. Onana leaving would still be difficult, but if he did leave, it would make it much easier to get a keeper in. So that one's still up in the air. I would still rate it more likely he stays and we get a cheap keeper, but there's always the potential it shifts the other way. And he does leave if there's interest in him. If an offer comes in, essentially, that's the main issue. Is if an offer comes in that could work, then that'll happen. Antony Betis is moving. There's been a lot of talks recently directly about that. Sancho is moving on the Italian front. Inter will move more for Hoyland once they kind of settle on where they're signing a striker Bonnie as well, but they want two, and then they will be moving forward on that as well. Now the reports from Italy, there was one previously on that Carnesecchi saying that it'll cost 45 to 50 million euros. That's a lot. So at that price, realistically, that would have to be if we sold Onana, but there seems to be legs to this. So it seems like the Carnesecchi one might be one we look at if we can sell Onana, that we could go for a keeper like that. But maybe we think he's really, really top. So Rashford as well. Once Barcelona wrap up Nico Williams or decide or finish it, whether they get it done or not, whether when it's wrapped, then they'll work on the Rashford case. But realistically, can go elsewhere. The biggest sale I think that we're gonna struggle with right now is Garnacho. I think that based on all the news, everything's kind of moving. Sancho, Antony, Hoyland, Rashford, even Onana. There's like stories and things and interest being fielded and talks actively occurring on all of these fronts, but not Garnacho. Maybe it'll be a wake up call, maybe not, but we do need it to happen one way or another. So hopefully something does move there and kind of get going, because that would be a significant sale that would obviously help us quite a lot. Um, but it does limit things when it's the Premier League only, and when it's outside the top four, my understanding has been that it'll probably be after July 1st because there's a lot of teams outside the big ones that are getting Champions League that need to balance the books, and they're likely not buying much before this point. Now, there's big clubs selling right now, like Bournemouth and stuff, but for a lot of them, they need to balance the books before July 1st, and then afterward they'll come in. So maybe that'll heat up after that point in time. In the meantime, that's it. We're working on a shitload of sales. We've made checks on strikers. We're willing to wait that out. If an offer comes in for Onana, it seems like we have some targets lined up to replace him. and it seems like we might have some backup or competition targets lined up kind of separately as well. Um, sales, raise some money, see if it can help us get some more stuff in the door and fund the other moves that we need to make, including the striker front as we wait that out and see where it lands with our major targets. Okay, that's it. That's the news for the week. I think that's pretty clear and concise as to what's happening. I would definitely suggest that next week we should start to hear on Mbumo. I've heard more and more optimism, more and more like there might be some progress maybe, but I don't quote me on that yet because it's just like grapevine rather than anything solid at the moment. But we really should start hearing more on next week on Mbumo as he'll be coming back soon, and we'll want to get him in very quickly for preseason, which is um, about 16 days away. So next week will start to become important to make sure we have time for everything. I think the we will also start to get some a little more movement on sales, but everything is kind of creeping forward. At some point, I believe the dam will break and it'll go, bang, 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 and everything will start getting knocked down deals wise and actually start kind of coming through. That's my hope anyway. That's my expectation. Um, I've kind of understand how they work. They work on all fronts at the same time, and to get things going. Um, Let me see some comments here. Apologize because I'm on my screen. The chat is frozen, so I opened it on my phone and I was like, "Oh shit!" There's a whole bunch of comments. But yeah, it seems like we're making the right progress here. Um, so let's see if there's anything else I want to discuss. Yeah, I will be on with the guys at United View in like 30 minutes. Yeah, sorry I didn't see all these comments before, but let's see. Yeah, I think most people would be down with a different keeper rather than Emi Martinez, and I would agree. Um, I think in keepers, I wouldn't worry about Syria. Look, and on the question, I think that there was a little story like Rashford, Sancho, Antony, and Garnacho will not be on the tour even if they're still here. I think there's probably truth in that. I think there's probably truth in that. If I was Sancho, I'd be sprinting to Italy. Yeah, Italy seems like a good option. And part of the reason is like why we don't need these players that aren't going to be there when we want to have space for the academy. By India, perhaps Turkey. It feels like a slow week, and look, part of that is the reality is that it is a slow week. It hasn't been like fast, but I do know that United have been actively working on sales, like very directly, even more than they usually would. Where they're just kind of waiting for offers to come in from agents and things. I know they've been really strongly active on that front. But look, it is slow, but that's also because the market is slow. Pre-June, July 1st because of PSR, and also because there's a lot of people in the whole economy, um, Club World Cup, holidays, things like that. It will speed up as we get closer to July 1, and I expect there to be a decent flurry of activity between like the 25th and the 1st. And then I think after that, a lot of stuff will just start popping through week by week. They did it last summer too, where it was like lined up, and then suddenly it was like 6 signings in 6 weeks. And I think that that's kind of the way we'll see it, where we've got Cunha in some point, whether next week or the week after, and Bumo will be done, and then it'll be like bang, couple sales, bang another and hopefully by the time we go to US, we got to have 3 starting level players in the door. If we had a keeper as well, that would be pretty nice too. But certainly we need those forwards desperately. Okay, thanks guys. Keep it there. This will go up on YouTube in a minute. If you're watching over on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. Come join on Big Up for next week if you want to watch it live. I'll be down. I'll be on a little bit later as well, and I'll be for those of you here live now. I'll be joining United View over on the Trinity, I think in about 20 minutes. Okay. See you later, everybody. Have a good day. Enjoy your Friday. Enjoy your weekend. Thank